Hello and welcome to this video. Today I'm going to make my own custom dice box complete with actually a custom mold. I didn't really film the mold making process because it was a lot of back and forth. Basically I started out with a filament 3D print and then filled in the gaps, made a mold of that, casted it in some other casting material that I could sand down a bit more, and yeah, then casted that one again in silicone. It was a lot of sanding and the mold isn't as smooth as I hoped it would be, but at that point I spent I don't know how many hours at sanding, up to 20 I'm gonna say, probably, maybe even more. But anyways, I wanted to pour this, and for the first pour I mixed up some glitter with some red, blue and some normal bit more opaque black to get this nice galaxy effect. It's basically the same thing that I usually do for the galaxy spheres that I made. You know, just some very light pigments, in this case mostly just UV resin pigments that are not opaque, and just so that density matches even for the black I chose the same pigment, and that made this really beautiful galaxy effect. As you can see, in some corners you can actually still see the lines of the printing, but when I made the model, really couldn't sand that part at all. I really had trouble sanding it because the walls of the top lid are so thin that I actually had some breaks in my original parts. I had to glue them together again, and the material I used was usually quite strong, but I know that once the resin is cured it should be a really nice thickness, and I didn't want the lid to be too heavy because already the bottom part is quite heavy. As you can see, I unmolded it way earlier because I hoped it would help with the unmolding. It was still a struggle. This mold has thick walls, so I knew that would happen. They don't give in as much. So all I basically had to do was trim off the excess resin and then press the lid onto the base so it would harden in the end like it should, and I also used my table surface as a flattening method. Now the key knight might have actually noticed that the lid has a little gap and doesn't sit flush with the top of the mold, and that is for magnets and potentially also maybe any kind of, I don't know, felt or anything you want, if you want to use the lid as a dice rolling tray thing. And also the other side has tiny indent spare things for 0.5mm neodymium magnets that are cuboid. So in the end all I did was glue on some really flat magnet strips and the cube neodymium magnets onto both sides, and yes, they do not interlock on all sides, so you need to twist it so it fits, but in the end I'm super happy with it. And I also decided to decorate the top with just some moons and a little bit of glitter that would fit really well, since the top was kind of a bit sunken in from the pour, and this worked really nicely and it looks super pretty. All I did was just use some nail art glitter to put on top that is a bit flat and wouldn't actually protrude out of the pour I did, and I'm super happy with this one. And since this one worked so well, I wanted to make a second one. This time I wanted to make a duetary for the wider cup pour. So I mixed this Morandi pigment in white, pink, blue and this chocolatey kind of brown, and I just poured it into the mold. I really like how the colors mix. From my previous experiment I knew that would happen, but I think it looks super nice. It has like a slightly marbled effect. The brown definitely took over a bit, and the blue hit a bit, even though I tried to like add a bit more blue, but you can still see it slightly. Although on camera it looks more cream than anything else. There was some bits left in the divider cup that sadly flew in with the mold, but luckily the colors aren't too invasive, so it doesn't really matter. There's also a lot of air pockets in this one. Even though I let the resin sit for quite a while, it seems that the bubbles cannot really escape the divider cup as much, probably because there's too much surface area, and when you pour it and the 4 streams connect, it just doesn't let them roam freely. But that is totally fine. I'm probably gonna use this dice box for myself anyways. Now, I didn't really brain at the moment when I poured the top layer for this one, because as you can see there's resin leaking off the surface, and that's because my table isn't level. So I scooped most of the resin back up, and of course I didn't just put the lid there, I put the dice box there for the pour. I don't know why I didn't just put the lid there like the first time. I guess at the moment I wasn't really thinking, but yeah, usually I would have just used the lid to pour so things like this don't happen. I tried to really thoroughly wipe the sides instead of just taking the lid off. I guess my brain didn't brain there, but you know, happens sometimes in projects, you learn from your mistakes. But yeah, the lid fused. Definitely wasn't the best thing, but in the end I used my crafting knife to get the initial like cut free. It was just one side, sadly it already ripped a little bit in one spot, but you know, since I used this dice box for myself it should be fine. So I actually used my lighter to heat up the resin a bit and warm it up so it becomes malleable again. And then I went back and forth with like a Cricut tool and my knife and just tried to pry it open. Of course some parts ripped off a little bit and I had to like really shave them off with my knife in the end, but it worked out well, and I actually could fill the holes it left on the lid with, you know, some super glue and the parts that broke off. It isn't too bad and I can still use this one, so I'm totally fine with it. Like, the lid is still usable, the side is still usable, and it still looks really nice. So in the end, just sanding it a little bit and gluing some parts back together worked out super well, and yeah, definitely still a usable box. And as you may have noticed, for this top I actually used these beads, but I'm not really worried about it not sitting flat because most of them are equal size, and this pour was actually quite flat on top, even before I put the like decoration layer. And yeah, it actually sits quite flat. It has a bit of a gap, of course, because it sits on the beads, but it works out really well. And here you can see both of the dice boxes. I think the Galaxy one turned out super well, it's super pretty. And as for this one, I really like it too. You can, like, in person see the swirls a bit more, and although it has some air pockets, I'm gonna fill them probably with some UV resin later. And even so, they're not really that noticeable from the outside or anything, so since I use it for personal use, it isn't really bothering me. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this little video. Let me know in the comments down below. If you could design your own dice box, which kind of shade would it have, and also which kind of color combinations or effects would you go with? Would you go maybe all glitter? Would you go just a single color with like maybe some embeds or something? I always love to hear all of your guys' ideas and inspirations for these kinds of things. And as always, I hope you enjoyed the video. Have a great day. Bye bye!